So today I'm joined by Simon Brown, who is a well-known and trusted market commentator. He shares his views in the media, writes for Financial Mail, hosts a daily show on MoneyWeb, and is a co-host of The Week That Was on Business Day. He's also a host and produces JSE Direct. So we are talking about someone who has been in the industry for many, many years. So today he's going to explain to us all about tax-free savings accounts, compound interest, and talk about the video that I made on Instagram. Now, Simon is here because I went to his website, Just One Lab, to read an article about how you can potentially save for your child's education and investment for the future. And I was astounded by the numbers. And I shared them with my audience. And of course, Simon, there were believers and complete non-believers. All right. So I'm here to ask you about tax-free savings accounts and the importance of them, but really dive into the calculations that you had. And I can give you some of the questions that we had on that video. Thank you so much for being here today, Simon.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
100%. So give us a little bit of background. So tax-free savings accounts were introduced in 2015, 10 years ago now. What is the purpose of a tax-free savings account, and why do you continue to talk about tax-free savings even 10 years later?
I think, so you're right, introduced in the budget of 2015 by then Finance Minister Nhlanhla. And the idea behind it really was to, how do we incentivize South Africans of all ages? Because you can start this from birth, you can start one when you're 99. Well, I was going to say 99, but that would suggest you couldn't do it at 100. You can do it whenever. And the idea was, how do we incentivize South Africans to have a savings culture? And it's not that we don't have it. Savings culture is not something that's particularly predominant the world over. Most people aren't saving as much as we should. And the idea was, well, why don't we incentivize them with that tax-free saving? And then they put a few sort of carrots and sticks. There are annual limits, which is currently you can only put in 36,000 Rand per individual per tax year. So that's the March to February tax year. And ultimately, there's a 500,000 limit for the individual. So after about 14 or so years, you hit that 500,000 lifetime limit. But what it does then is it means that you can invest without any consequences of paying tax. And just as a simple example, if you had a normal portfolio that had a profit of whatever it was, I mean, you would be paying somewhere between 10 and 18% of that profit on tax when you were selling in your old age for retirement. In the tax-free account, you're not paying any tax whatsoever. It goes further, dividends, which are your share of profits that are paid out, typically taxed at 20%. Again, zero tax to be paid on that. So it really was to incentivize a savings culture and to give us that carrot, which is, well, you can do it, but you've got to do it in the tax-free account, and you've got some limits, but that carrot is really strong in terms of what you save.
Yeah, but now just on that, Simon, you're saying it is completely tax-free. So we'll go back to the calculation. So let's say at the end of the day, you've accumulated 27 million Rand or a million Rand as an example. Someone in the question said, it is impossible. SARS will never ever let you go away with that money. What do you say to someone who says that?
So it's totally possible, but there is a caveat. You can't, the viewers, we can't say, oh, this is our tax-free account. We have to have opened a tax-free account from a financial services provider. So you and I can't set up and say, come to us for, we've got to be a financial services provider. You've got to nominate a certain account and say, this account, I'm opening it. It is my tax-free account. You can have multiple. You could have with different providers, but your annual limit is for the individual, not per account. And then there are restrictions as to what you can put in it as well. But it's absolutely there. And I mean, if someone's not convinced, they can go back to the budget speech of 2015. They can go and find that relevant legislation which enables it. And it is a significant saving for the average individual. What it's not doing is someone like a Patrice Motsepe, who is worth billions and billions. Well, he's also only got a 500,000 lifetime limit, and that's how SARS is capping it. For probably the majority of South Africans, 500,000 is a giant number that it's going to take them years, decades to get to. But for a very rich person, they don't get an extra benefit. So it really is saying, up to a certain level, but beyond that, no chance whatsoever.
Yeah, but just explain to our audience there, because I think now the misconception is you can only put 500,000, then you're going to get taxed on the growth. You do not get taxed on the growth, right?
Correct. Correct. And let's take an example. I know we're working with crazy big numbers, but
Yeah.
let's say over a 14-year period or so, you've put your 500,000 in. It of course grows, and it'll if it's just doing a modest 7.5% a year, which is not particularly thrilling. It's going to double every decade. So you put it in 30 years' time, it's grown initially to 1 million, then to 2, now to 4 million. You've got 3.5 million of profit in this account. That would normally be taxed. In this case, SARS is saying, not to worry, there's no tax on that. And again, I come to the point, for a lot of South Africans, that is more than enough. But there's that sort of bunch of South Africans at the top, the one percenters, but probably more than one percenters, the 10 percenters at the top. You're going to say, you know what, 4 million is nice, but it's not enough for my retirement. So they will have other retirement products, and SARS will catch the tax there.
100%. Okay, so now let's go back to your example that you did. And you said, okay, you assume that the child is born, their parents puts away 36,000 Rand in a tax-free savings account, and they don't contribute a cent after that. And you said, okay, perhaps they leave it even further as part of their retirement, and at the age of 65, how much will this person have? And just give us a little bit of your assumptions there as well.
Yeah, so the short answer is they'll have almost 3 million Rand in that account, but the assumptions are the very, very important part. My assumption is that you can do a 7%, what we call a real return. In other words, 7% after inflation. So that 3 million Rand I talk about is in today's spending money, because particularly over 65 years, the numbers get humongously giant, but they're meaningless because, of course, of inflation. So I'm assuming 7%. Inflation is currently running 2.8. Let's call inflation 3% at the moment. There's talk around setting a new inflation target. So, in fact, we'll hopefully see a lower inflation in the decades ahead. But at that point, it means if you're doing a 10% return, 3% is just keeping up with inflation. 7% is your real return. And that then gives you that 36,000 grows to almost 3 million. To be clear, a 10% return is not a onerous return. Right now, you could buy a government bond and earn around 10%. And a government bond is considered one of the lowest risk investments in the market. Your equity market, you would expect to give you probably closer to 12, maybe 13 or 14. So, in fact, my assumptions, and purposely so, are perhaps a little on the conservative side.
Oh.
And the reason is so that people can't come and say, oh, your assumptions are crazy. But to your point, it is important that you understand that we've had to make assumptions here. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 65 years.
100%. So someone else comes and says, okay, because I think we do not grasp the idea that this is real return after inflation. So many people have seen your assumptions, or the calculations rather, at 2.9 billion and say, well, I mean, 2.9 million when the child is 65 will probably buy me a loaf of bread. How do you explain to them how these assumptions work?
Yeah, so what the number actually is, and I don't have it in front of me, but the number in today's money at age 65 is literally tens and tens of millions of rands. But as I said, that becomes a completely meaningless number. I say let's pick a number. It's going to be 50 million.
Yeah.
That means nothing, because you're right. What are things going to cost in 65 years? We don't know. Your 50 million is, it might get you a weekend away, and then that's your retirement finished. Now what? Back to work. And that's why we do that real return. So essentially, we remove inflation from the equation, and we say this is 3 million Rand in today's money. In other words, it has the same spending power as money has today. Now, again, we're not sure. I mean, we don't even know what our motor cars will look like. What's our public transport going to be? We know none of that. So we don't know directly what our costs will be. We've got a sense we need shelter, of course, we need to eat, we need healthcare. We know those, but we don't know what they're going to be. But it is 3 million in today's spending power so that it makes it a real tangible number for people. Because, we can go to these calculators, which you see on the websites, and they tell you what you're going to have at retirement, but it's meaningless because of that inflation.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it brings me nicely to the next question. And this was from Janet_SA. She went on about inflation and she says you can easily blow 2.9 million today in basic needs like getting a family home and school fees. To stay above inflation, one needs to annually top up the investment contribution. And this is where your next example came through to say, well, let's take it further. Say you are contributing the 36,000 rand, 36,000 rand per year. That's the maximum contribution that you can make for the duration of about 14, 15 years. That's when you can,
Yeah.
that's when you get to the 500,000 limit. What do you say to someone who says, well, 2.9, it's not really factual, but now you've gone even further with the example and the numbers are even bigger.
Yeah, I mean, so if you do the 36,000, you start on the day that the child is born, you do 36,000 a year into their account. To be clear, this is a very, very lucky child.
Yeah.
And you do that for the 14 or so years until you've hit that 500,000 annual limit. Same assumption that you're going to grow at 7% after inflation. Your number comes out at around 27 million in today's
In
money. So, in other words,
today's
your spending
money.
power of 27 million. What that does, we then use something called the 4% rule, which says if you take out 4% of your capital every year when you hit retirement, that'll last you for the rest of your life so that when you pass, you've actually left capital to your heirs, to your family. But that essentially gives you almost 100,000 Rand per month tax-free in today's money. And I think what a lot of people are perhaps missing as well is that the tax-free component here is hugely important.
Mhm.
Absolutely, it is. But there's a second lever that we're pulling here, and that is the 65 years. That is an immensely long. Most people would start investing somewhere in their 20s. They would take retirement somewhere in their 60s. In other words, they've only usually got a 40-year time horizon. Whereas here, we're sitting on a 65-year time horizon, and that time is probably as important to the equation as is the
The
tax-free
tax-free.
component to it.
Yeah, yeah. And what would you say then to someone who is maybe they are 30 or 35, for example, and they are seeing this information for the first time, or finally it clicks the importance and just how beneficial a tax-free savings account. Should they start today also, or should they just say, oh, well, that train has left for me?
Oh no, you definitely start today. I mean, for example, I mean, I am I'm 55. So when tax-free savings came, I was already 45,
Yeah.
and there was no chance that I was going to say it's too late. You know what I'm doing? I'm taking money that I would have invested into a normal account, in which I would then pay normal tax on come to retirement. I'm now just targeting at this. So what I'm essentially doing, you got tax benefits with your Reg 28 pension investments. You've got a tax benefit with your tax-free account. They're different, but they're both there. And I say to folks, max out your tax benefits first. Use those saving products first. Then, if you've still got money over and above, and now we're starting to talk big numbers, if you've still got money over and above that you want to save, you can put that into what we call your discretionary. In other words, an account with no tax benefit. It'll just be the normal tax treatment. But should you start one now? Absolutely. Yeah, I chatted with someone a few weeks ago, and he was in his late 70s, him and his partner. And they'd started it when it came out a decade ago. So
Oh,
they were
wow.
at that point in the late 60s. And their argument was quite simple. Every February, the budget minister, the finance minister rather, stands up at budget and tells us how much it's going to cost us more to live every year. That's just that's the world over. Sometimes they put money back into your pocket. This is an example of them putting money back into your pocket, and you should take an advantage of it. Some people say to me, I don't have the 36,000. I'm like, well, then put what you can. 36 is a limit, but there's some folks out there on Twitter and the like, the social media, they still at school. They may be doing 1 or 2 thousand a year at most, but they still do it because that benefit over time.
100%. And I know about the benefits. I have one for myself. I have one for my two kids. My husband has one. Literally every single person I know, if They're in my life. I always advocate for having a
They
tax-free
have one. Yeah,
account.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You sort of evangelize. You meet someone,
Yes,
you say, "Do you have
yes,
a
yes.
tax-free
I'm
account?"
I'm a, I'm a tax-free savings account ambassador. All right, just to wrap up, what do you want people to really get to know about a tax-free savings account? And I mean, you have thoroughly explained real return versus nominal return and purchasing power. Why do you think people really can't grasp these numbers that we are talking about? And for me, I think, Simon, I mean, you've been in the industry for many years. You've seen, the markets go down, up, down over the years. I think sometimes it's because of experience or lack of experience or having really seen these numbers play out. What do you think is the reason?
I think there are a couple of things. I mean, people, this industry, like all industries, uses a lot of jargon, and that alienates people. And the jargon is just there to jargon's almost like a barrier we put up, right? I use fancy words, you don't understand me, now it makes me seem smarter than everybody else. And that's not the case. It's the fancy words.
Yeah.
There's a lot of jargon. There's also fear. We saw markets collapse in the pandemic. We saw markets sell off back in April when President Trump did his liberation trades. There's that worry that I'm going to take my hard-earned money and I'm going to put it into this investment and it's going to fall in value. And the honest answer is it will fall sometimes. It'll rise more than it falls. It will go through periods of, the sell-off earlier this year was very quick. But if we go back to 2008, 2009, the sell-off from the global financial crisis took 3, 4 years to recover. Markets do recover, and it comes back to the point, which is about the time. So I think there's a fear of markets. I think there's too much jargon in our industry, which kind of tries to create that barrier. And I think there's also another truth, which is, it's tough being a consumer in South Africa. It's better than it was a year ago, but it's not all honey and milkshakes. It's tough out there, and folks are struggling just to pay shelter costs, to pay education costs, to keep their insurance fully paid up, etc. And finding more money to invest is truthfully hard. And then it's, of course, you invest some money now. I'm telling you to come back in not a
20 years
month or a
time.
year or it exactly. And people are like, sure, 40 years,
Yeah.
65 years. I mean, you've got to be crazy. But that's what investing is. It's not the instant gratification. The instant gratification is a dinner with your family and loved ones on a Friday evening somewhere. This is long term. It's slow. It's methodical. But the implications are huge. The fact that we can afford a retirement when we get into our 60s and live out our latter years with a modicum of comfort. We're not going to be rich. We're not going to be renting super yachts and stuff, but that we can have a modicum of comfort is hugely empowering. And then if we can leave some level of legacy to our children, even more so.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that is spot on. Thank you so much, Simon, for being here, sharing your knowledge and making sense of the big numbers.
My absolute pleasure.
Oh, my word. Thank you so much, Simon. That was brilliant. And short and sweet, and hopefully it will drive the point that go get yourself a tax-free savings account.
Yeah, go get one. I'm like you. Everyone has one. My wife, my sister, my niece, everyone I know has tax-free accounts.
Yeah, it's such a
Compulsory
brilliant
to be a
thing.
friend of mine.
So for you, I mean, I didn't ask it because I said, you know what, I don't want us to get into that conversation here. But if you have a pension or provident fund, you're saying rather go max out the tax-free savings account, right? Then after that, do a discretionary fund.
Yeah. So if you got pension or provident from work, then that's been taken. Max
Hmm.
out your tax free, then go and do discretionary.
Okay.
Use the benefits that you get from the taxman. There's
And
not
you
many of
hardly
them.
ever, yeah, I was about to say, you hardly get those. But thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciate your
My
time.
absolute pleasure.
All righty.
Okay.
Yes.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.